Yeah, it's a new Zoom thing. It tells you that it's recording. Okay, it's good to see everybody. It's good to see that we are continuing to survive this pandemic that we are all trying to live through. And it's good to hear that a couple of people on this Zoom call have gotten or have an appointment for their booster shot. So that's good. Hopefully we will all take advantage of that when it's our turn. Today we're in the middle of the month of Elul, which means that 2 weeks from this past Monday night is Rosh Hashanah. So the new year is quickly approaching. And because of that, usually I don't resume adult education classes in August, but because of how early the Jewish year is this year, I decided to start now. So I'm glad that you're all here to attend virtually, and there will be others who will be watching this as well. So welcome back, and prayers that this coming new year will be one of health and blessing for all of us. So the Torah portion this week is Ki Tavo, and the blessing for Torah study, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So in the Eitz Chaim, it begins on page 1140. Whatever edition of Torah you have, look for chapter 26 of the Book of Deuteronomy. As the entire Book of Deuteronomy is, the context is Moses talking to the people of Israel as they are poised to enter the land of Israel. To cross the Jordan River and to enter the land of Israel, the promised land, begin to settle the land and to make it the home of the Israelite people. So they are on the western bank, no, they are on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. My sense of direction, no, north, south. Yes, the eastern bank of the Jordan River, and they in the plains of Moab, and perhaps across from the city of Jericho on the other side there. Unclear exactly geographically where this was, but it's possible if you look at the map. That's after page, that's on page 1513 in the Eitz Chaim. If you look at the map back here, they have plains of Moab right here above the Dead Sea on the eastern side of the Jordan River. So that's as far as scholars can get in pinpointing that location. So at this point in the Book of Deuteronomy, Moses is encouraging the people in this portion in two things. One, highlighting for them how fruitful the land of Israel will be, and we'll look at this in a moment, in that they will be able to bring, and that they are commanded to bring, first fruits to the sanctuary every year in a ceremony in which they will relive Jewish history. And then later in the portion, we're told about blessings and curses that the people will experience if they follow in God's ways or if they neglect to follow in God's ways. So two different ways in which Moses is encouraging the people. First with a positive experience that they're going to have, and then with blessings and curses, kind of a threatening the people with punishment if they don't follow in God's ways. So two very different ways to try to convince people to do the right thing. and it's interesting educationally. How do you get, how do you convince students as a teacher? How do you convince students to listen to the teacher? Do you provide a positive experience so that kids will automatically want to be engaged in the project or the lesson? Or do you threaten the student with punishment if they don't follow the rules? So those of us who have been teachers know which one is actually more effective. So so we'll get to the blessings and curses in a moment. Let's first look at page 1140 and 1141 for the opening of the portion and this experience that the people are, that Moses says the people will have. So again, chapter 26, verse 1, 1140 in Eitz Chaim, V'haya ki tavo el haaretz, v'haya. So it's literally haya means was, but in this context, it doesn't mean was. And using it in this form, v'haya, when it comes to pass, or it will come to pass, or in that moment when, is a kind of the suggested ways of translating. It just says here when. It's more than just when. V'haya ki tavo el haaretz. This will come to pass when. The key means when. Tavo, when you enter the land, Asher Adonai Elohecha, that God, your God, noten lecha nachala, is giving to you as an inheritance, or here it says heritage, virishta, and you shall inherit it, or no, you shall possess it, viashavta ba, and you will settle in it. Okay, so it will come to pass when you enter the land that God is giving you as a heritage, that you will inherit and you will settle in it. So a long way to say, when you enter God's land, which is your gift. 2, verse 2, V'lakachta mereshit kol peri ha'adama, you shall take from the first of every fruit of the earth, Asher tavi ma'artzecha, that will be brought from your land, that will be brought forth from the land. Asher Adonai, I'm translating it literally. You follow along in the translation here as to see why the editors translated the way they did. Asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach, that God, your God, is giving you. V'samta vatena, you shall put it, the fruit, in a basket. V'halachta el hamakom, and walk or travel, go to the place. Asher yivchar Adonai Elohecha, that God, your God, will choose. Leshakein shemo sham, to have his name dwell there. Okay, so the Book of Deuteronomy, for scholars, most biblical scholars agree that the Book of Deuteronomy was written after the events that are described in the Book of Deuteronomy. So in other words, I just said the context, the historical context that the Book of Deuteronomy presents is that the people are poised to enter the land of Israel. However, scholars reading the Book of Deuteronomy generally agree that the Book of Deuteronomy was written much later than it says it was. And one element that highlights that is that it's only in the Book of Deuteronomy that we have a reference to a place where God is going to cause God's name to dwell. We have in the book of Exodus the command to build the Mishkan right there while they're camped at Mount Sinai. They build the sanctuary. The book of Leviticus describes all the sacrifices that are to be brought to that sanctuary. And the book of Numbers describes how the sanctuary was broken down and reconstructed as the people traveled throughout the Sinai, throughout the desert for 40 years. It's only in Deuteronomy that we don't have a reference to the Mishkan per se. We have a reference to a future home where God's name will reside, where God's presence will reside. So that's why, one of the reasons why the rabbis think that that's a reference to the existing temple in Jerusalem for the authors of the Book of Deuteronomy. That perhaps the Book of Deuteronomy was written already when the temple was standing and written as a religious commentary to how the Israelites were already living in the land of Israel. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that about this reference to bring the fruit, the first fruit of the land. And so that could be any kind of, it's not fruit trees. So in other words, don't bring the first apples or plums or oranges, but it's anything that grows. So it's the fruit of the land, the bounty of the land, not necessarily just specifically fruit from fruit trees. So it could be the first grain, first vegetables, etc. And bring that, doesn't say when, but bring that when you harvest it to that future temple in Jerusalem. We know from the rabbis in later generations that this was associated with the holiday of Shavuot. Shavuot, one of the name for Shavuot in the Torah is Chag HaBikurim, the holiday of the first fruits. And so the Mishnah, the first collection of Jewish law by the rabbis, describes in great detail how people from across the land of Israel would travel to Jerusalem with the first fruits, and exactly what kind of basket they would have the fruits in. So it said, put it in a basket. The Torah doesn't say here in verse 2 what kind of basket it should be, but we have details in the Mishnah about the variety of baskets, from simple woven straw baskets to very elaborate gold or silver baskets, so that some people, it could have been off-putting to people who couldn't afford it, to see others carrying fruit in these gold baskets, clearly people of wealth. And here, other people in very simple straw baskets bringing their fruit. So the rabbis made very clear that everybody should bring it in the same kind of basket so that people wouldn't feel put off. And then we're also going to see in a couple of verses what else the rabbis say about this. So bring these fruits, this produce, this first produce in a basket to the house that God will choose. Verse 3, Uvata el HaKohen, and you approach the Kohen, Asher Yihiyeh Bayamim Hahem, who will be at that time, Ve'amarta elav, and say to the Kohen, Higadati hayom la'Adonai Elohecha, I say today, or the English says, I acknowledge. It could be I proclaim. Higadati is like Haggadah for the Passover Seder, the order of the telling. I've told today to God, your God, Kivati el haaretz, that I came to the land, Asher nishba Adonai la'avotenu latet lanu, that God swore to our ancestors to give to us. Right, so here I'm fulfilling the commandment to bring this fruit. Verse 4, V'lakach hakohen hatena miyadecha, the Kohen will take the basket from your hand, V'hinicho, and will put it lifnei mizbach Adonai Elohecha, in front of the altar of God, your God. Okay, so that's the procedure. You bring the basket of fruit, give it to the Kohen, and say, here is the fruit that I swore that that God told me to bring once I enter the land of Israel. Now, it's not just a one-time thing. It's something every year on the holiday of Shavuot that this is to be brought. And then the Kohen takes the basket and puts it in front of the altar. But then, verse 5, this is what you're supposed to say. This is the formula, the liturgy for what you're supposed to say after the Kohen takes the basket of produce from you. V'anita v'amarta, and you answer and you say, Lifnei Adonai Elohecha, before God your God, quote, Arami Oved Avi. My father was the word Oved here is tricky. How to translate this word? Down below it says fugitive. It could be wandering. My father was a wandering Aramean. It could be a perishing Aramean. It could be a straying Aramean. Yes, Jan, unmute yourself.
Isn't that like in the Passover Haggadah?
Yes, exactly. I was going to say, once finishing this paragraph, that it could sound familiar. Yes, this is the body of the Magid section, that the whole section in the Haggadah that is Midrash on these verses here. And there's a question raised there and also in rabbinic sources. Who is the Aramean that is being discussed here? My father was a wandering Aramean means we're referring to Jacob, the third of the three patriarchs, who went from Israel to escape his brother's anger to Padan Aram, or to that village in Aram, northeast of Israel, what is Syria today, and then married Leah and Rachel, had their children, and then came back to the land of Israel. So that's the reference of who the wandering Aramean is. But the word Oved, translated as fugitive or wandering, could also mean about to kill. So maybe it's a reference to Jacob's father-in-law, Lavan, who was known as Lavan Ha'arami, Lavan the Aramean, and maybe Lavan who chased after Jacob, even though Lavan agreed to Jacob to leave his home. Lavan and his retinue chased after Jacob because he changed his mind. So maybe that's what's being referred to here. That's a discussion for the Haggadah. Depending which edition of Haggadah you have, you'll have commentary there explaining this, but it's the first part of history. It could also refer to Abraham, because Abraham started in Ur Kasdim, was born there, which it's unclear, but maybe it's at the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates. Well, they don't exactly meet, but they are. If you picture the map of Iraq modern Iraq in your mind's eye, the Tigris and Euphrates like form a V, and they start like in the mountains of Turkey and Syria, and then slowly get closer together by the time it gets to the Persian Gulf. They don't come exactly together like this, but closer together like this. So it's possible that in southern Iraq is where Abraham was born. He and his family traveled up to Haran, what is in Syria today, and then from there, after God commanded Abraham and Sarah to go to the land of Israel, that's where they started their journey. So perhaps that's the wandering that is referred to here, originally to Abraham. It's unclear, but it's clear that the reference is starting in a place where we started from some other place and eventually got to Israel. Arami Oved Avi, my father, my ancestors were wandering Aramean. Vayered Mitzrayma, they went down to Egypt. Vayagar Sham, they lived there. Bimatei Ma'at, in just a relatively few numbers. Vayehi Sham, and there Legoy Gadol Atzum Varav, and there they became a great, mighty, a great and very populous nation, as it is translated here, a people great and mighty indeed. Verse 6, Vayareu Otanu, they dealt harshly, Hamitzrim, Vaye'anunu, the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and tortured us or oppressed us. Vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha, and they gave to us or forced us into hard labor. Vanitzak, and we cried out, El Adonai Elohei Avotenu, to God, the God of our ancestors. Vayishma Adonai et kolenu, God heard our voice. Vayar et onyenu, and saw our suffering. V'et amalenu, v'et lachatzenu, saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. Okay, so that's how those three synonyms, onyenu, amalenu, lachatzenu, is translated, our plight, misery, and oppression. Verse 8, Vayotzienu Adonai mimitzrayim, God brought us out of Egypt, biyad chazakah, uvizroa netuya, with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, uvamora gadol, awesome power, uva otot uvamoftim, and with signs and wonders, or signs and portents, right? The reference to the 10 plagues and the parting of the sea. Vayavienu, verse 9, Vayavienu el hamakom hazeh, and he, God, brought us to this place, Vayitain lanu et haaretz hazot, and gave us this land, Eretz zavat chalav udavash, a land flowing with milk and honey. And verse 10, Va'ata hine heveti et reshit pri hadama, and now, behold, I have brought the first produce of the earth, asher natata li Adonai, that you, God, gave to me, vehi nachto lifnei Adonai Elohecha, and then and he placed it before God, your God, vehi shtachavita lifnei Adonai Elohecha, then you shall bow down or prostrate yourself before God, your God. And I just want to finish with verse 11, v'samachta v'chol hatov, and you shall rejoice with all the goodness, asher natan lecha Adonai Elohecha uleveitecha, that God, your God, has given to you and to your household, ata v'halevi v'hager asher bekirbecha, that God gave you and the Levi and the resident alien who is among you. Okay, so that whole phrasing, as Jan pointed out, yes, this is from the Haggadah. It's part and parcel of what we're supposed to recite every year for the Passover story. That we made it out. That we don't just recall slavery, but we focus instead on the miracle of the Exodus from Egypt, culminating in the settling of the land of Israel. Now, two things about this. First, these verses, which everybody is supposed to recite to the Kohen upon giving the Kohen the basket of fruit, everybody is supposed to recite this on their own. The Mishnah says that not everybody might know it by heart, and so the Kohen is supposed to prompt everybody to say it. Now that's interesting. Why wouldn't everybody know how to say this by heart? Not everybody might be fluent in the Hebrew. Fascinating too, in the time of the rabbis, that the language that people spoke was Aramaic and not Hebrew. Hebrew was sacred language. The spoken language of the average Jew at the time of the rabbis, at the end of when the temple was standing, was Aramaic. Okay, so which is like Jews in Eastern Europe speaking Yiddish and not Hebrew, right? There's a smattering of Hebrew in Yiddish, but it's also some German, Polish, and Russian words too. So Aramaic is a language that is similar to Hebrew. It's similar to Arabic and other Semitic languages all thrown in. Okay, so it mostly looks like Hebrew because it's the same Hebrew letters. It doesn't look Arabic. It is Hebrew letters, but it is the format of the words and the grammar of Aramaic is a little bit different. So it's enough different that not everybody would be so familiar with Hebrew unless they went to synagogue. And that's a question too. How many Jews at the time of the rabbis went to synagogue frequently enough to know Hebrew? And therefore, by the rabbis saying that the Kohen has to prompt everybody in saying this formula, just also emphasizes how everybody should be equal. Certain people shouldn't show off their knowledge and start reciting it by heart. Everybody needs to go through this ceremony by being prompted by the rabbis. It's like when I officiate at a wedding and I say to the groom placing the ring on the bride's hand, when I meet with the couple ahead of time, I said, don't bother memorizing this. You're going to be so nervous under the chuppah. You don't want to rely on memory, and perhaps your anxiety and stress might make you forget this. I'll just prompt you word by word what to say, the Harei At Mekudeshet line. Okay, so that's just what I do, and that's how I conduct the wedding. So no matter how proficient and knowledgeable the groom is, always I prompt them, and that's part of. So there could be an anxiety, an anxiousness, and a nervousness to a person coming into the temple, being in that awesome place, and maybe they would forget what they had to say. There could be that, and there's also a knowledge or background that perhaps a person feels embarrassed that they don't know the words. So whatever the situation, the Kohen is supposed to be prompting them in reciting this. So that is, and the other thing I want to say about this, in this brief history that's recited here in this paragraph, what's missing? Is there anything? So my ancestors who are wandering Arameans went to Egypt, became slaves. We became a mighty and great nation there. We were slaves. God brought us out. And here we are in the land of Israel, the land flowing in milk and honey, bringing to you, God, these first fruits. Is there something missing there? What is there anything missing in that brief history that that you think should be there, that the people should recite? There's a major event that happened in the desert shortly after they, like 3 months after they, in the third month after leaving Israel. Anybody remember what happened in that third month after leaving Egypt? Barbara.
The Ten Commandments.
Yeah, the Ten Commandments, right. And the Exodus, that's a major event. The revelation of God at Mount Sinai. How is that missed here? I mean, one of the reasons why they're actually in the temple bringing the fruit is because it's a law in the Torah that was revealed to Moses at Mount Sinai. So how is that revelation itself not mentioned? Like it could have said in verse 8, God brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and outstretched arm with signs and wonders, and then brought us to Mount Sinai. We received the Torah, and then brought us to this land. That little bit. I mean, that the idea of having the Torah sets the foundation for a structure for their lives. Without the Torah, it's just a one-way street with God, just faith. You need Torah too to help put that faith in context of actions, behaviors to do every single day. So it's a wonder that and a bafflement that Mount Sinai is not mentioned here. There is no easy answer for why that is the case. You also look at Psalm 136, which is a brief history also of God's wonders, creation of the world, bringing us out of Egypt, the victory over Sihon and Og, which the book of Numbers describes, the battles that the Israelites waged with neighboring nations on their way. So that Psalm 136 has that, but also Psalm 136 skips Mount Sinai. So it's just fascinating, raises a bigger question where that Mount Sinai experience fits in to later books in the Bible. And biblical scholars have theories about why in those brief histories that are mentioned, Mount Sinai is missing, but if they're just theories, we really don't know. Yes, Jane.
So if we go back to where you started, and you said that typically when you teach, if you accentuate the positive and,
Right.
and reward students for giving good answers and paying attention and whatnot. So kind of going that way, if you keep mentioning Mount Sinai, before the getting of the 10 Commandments was the golden calf. Oh, by the way, you were bad. And I brought down the first set of tablets, but yeah, we smashed those and you were bad.
Okay.
And so instead of kind of bringing up, oh, by the way, here's one more reminder of when you blew it. You know what? You come to the temple. In the temple is supposedly the original 10 Commandments, the broken pieces, as well as the intact set of. So it's kind of there as a symbol, but I don't need to put it in your face and remind you, by the way, you blew it.
All right, so that's an interesting idea that perhaps if Mount Sinai is mentioned here, that people would be thinking about the golden calf instead of only thinking about the 10 Commandments. So I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that that's a possible, it's a valid theory as to why the Mount Sinai experience isn't listed here. I would imagine, though, that the more important revelation of God and that experience of the people hearing God's voice there, but also receiving the Torah should be the experience focused on that, and you could avoid the golden calf in mentioning that. There is another theory as well, that it's well, a couple of theories. One is, well, when we're talking about bringing the first fruits, the focus is like, how is this ragtag group of slaves, how God worked wonders for them to make them into a great nation and give them this great gift of the land of Israel that is so fertile. So that's really the narrowed focus of what they're doing there at this moment with the first produce, and no reason to be distracted by other things that happened in that history. So in other words, like Psalm 136 brings up the battles with Sihon and Og, that's not mentioned here either. So just a focus on, remember your past where you were nothing. God made you into something and gave you the land of Israel that is flowing with milk and honey. And another idea is that some biblical scholars suggest that perhaps the Book of Deuteronomy, the authors of the Book of Deuteronomy had no idea that the Mount Sinai experience happened, and that there could have been different strands of oral traditions that had different elements of what happened in Israel's past. And one of them suggests that not all of the 12 sons of Jacob went down to Egypt. Some stayed in the land of Israel, while others went down to Egypt, and then they met afterwards in the book of Joshua and the book of Judges. There's that theory. And there's another theory that suggests that perhaps Mount Sinai experience was created after the fact to provide a spiritual kind of new connection to the people. So all these are kind of like radical ideas that go against what the Torah presents, but still biblical scholars suggest these different ideas for what happened in the origin of the Israelite people. Okay, as time goes on, there are more and more archaeological discoveries made that that can take us further back into biblical history, and that there are artifacts that were found that date back now to First Temple and even before First Temple, right? We have a reference that was found to the house of David, and so a reference to King David, but there's even more references further than that to one of the judges. That was something that happened a few weeks ago. There was some reference, some like pottery shard or something that had a name on it. That was a name of someone in the book of Judges. So that's remarkable. If that's proven to be true, then that's further. That's the furthest back that we can authentically corroborate a story from the Bible to actual historical relic. So we don't have anything further than that. Than a couple of weeks ago, that discovery of a name on a pottery shard from the time of the book of Judges. So that's pretty good. So if we can do that, that's book of Judges is about 1200 BCE. So 1200 and so that's 3,200 years ago. That's pretty amazing if we can corroborate that and authenticate that. Okay, so that's this section that I wanted to talk about, this bringing the first fruits to the temple. Now, there's this first, there's a ceremony described in what is where the fifth Aliyah begins on page 1146. It's chapter 27, verse 11, whatever edition of Chumash you're using. Chapter 27, verse 11, page 1146 in the Eitz Chaim. Here, Moses describes an event that will take place once the people enter the land of Israel, that they're supposed to be divided on these two mountains. Vayetzav Moshe et ha'am bayomahu lemor. Moses commanded the people on that day, saying, Eile ya'amdu levarech et ha'am. These are those who will be standing to bless the people al har Grizim, on Mount Grizim, ba'avrachem et hayarden, when you cross the Jordan River. These, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Yosef, and Binyamin. So these tribes, the tribe of Shimon, Levi, Judah, Yisachar, Joseph, which would be Ephraim and Manasseh, and Benjamin would be on Mount Gerizim. Ve'ele, and these, Yamdu al HaKlala, will be standing for the curse on Har Eval, on Mount Eval, Ruvain, Gad, and Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, and the other 6, which is really 7, because Joseph is Ephraim and Manasseh, on the other mountain. So Mount Gerizim and Mount Eval are neighboring hills in central Israel. Mount Gerizim is traditionally the home of the Samaritan people today. The Samaritans are a group of people that are that date back, the idea of the Good Samaritan from the Christian Bible is from this group of people that were like the Jewish people, like the Israelite people, but not quite like them. They have their own Bible, which is very similar to our Bible, and their practices are based just on the Bible. They don't subscribe to rabbinic Judaism, and they've intermarried with other groups of people, so that the Samaritans today, even though they have a Passover ritual of slaughtering a sheep on their Passover, which is similar to what the Torah describes, it's certainly, they're not a Jewish people. They're a subset of indigenous population to the land of Israel today. I don't know technically if they are citizens of Israel or they are citizens of the Palestinian Authority. They're in Palestinian Authority territory all around the city of Nablus, or Shechem in Hebrew, and Mount Gerizim is right outside, and Mount Eval are right outside the city of Nablus in central Israel above Jerusalem. So almost directly north. If you look at this map, again, on 1513 and the Eitz Chaim, you can't really see it here, but you see Jerusalem right above my finger, and then this is Shechem right here. Okay, so directly above Jerusalem, probably a day's or 2 days travel to get there by caravan. Central Israel. And then if you look at the map, which I can't really show it to you and you can't come up, but right above the word Shechem on that map is Mount Eval, and right below Shechem is Mount Gerizim. Okay, that's what we think are the two hills referred to here in the Torah. Okay, if you look at the footnote, it says that these two hills, I'm calling them hills, and are they really mountains? I don't know. How high does a mountain have to be called a mountain as opposed to a hill? Israel doesn't really have mountains. There's Mount Hermon, which is on the border of Israel and Syria. That's Taka, a mountain. You can ski on that mountain if there's snow on it. But these other mountains, they're really hills, okay, in the scheme of things. Maybe they're a couple thousand feet above sea level, but that's as far as they go. But they're 2.2 miles apart, it says in the commentary here. So they're standing 2 miles apart, okay? 3.5 kilometers apart. And they're on slopes of the mountains facing each other, but nonetheless, they are 2 miles apart. And what is supposed to happen? 14, verse 14, Va'anu haleviim, the Levites then shall proclaim El Kol Ish Yisrael Kol Ram, in a loud voice to all of Israel. So the Levites are supposed to proclaim the following curses for all of Israel to hear 2.2 miles apart. Is that realistic? Can people 2.2 miles away from each other hear? It's possible. It's possible to hear, when thunder, you can hear thunder from miles away, right? And there's a way to, like, if you see lightning crash and then you hear thunder afterwards, it tells you, however many seconds after the lightning flashes that you hear the thunder, how far away the storm is from you, right? So you remember learning that as a child. I don't remember how many seconds, how many miles, it doesn't matter, but you can hear thunder. That's a loud noise. I don't think people can talk as loud as thunder. Even if you had modern technology of a megaphone or some kind of sound system, then it's more likely that you can hear. There are voices that you can hear if there's no other ambient sound around, right? So there wouldn't be sounds of cars or traffic that would be competing with this. Could they have heard this realistically? I'm not sure. But then here's the whole list of curses that are supposed, this is like a formula, a ceremony that's supposed to happen on these mountains to kind of symbolize or solemnize the entrance to the land of Israel. Arur ha'ish asher ya'aseh fesel umasecha. Cursed be the person who would make or fashion an idol or or a sculptured or molten image. Toavat Adonai. It's an abhorrence to God. Maaseh yedei charash. This craftsman's handiwork. V'sam basater, and puts it aside, hides it. Va'anu kol ha'am va'amru amen. Right. So don't have any hidden idol in your home. And the people say yes, amen. Arur makle aviv ve'imo. So that's the first curse that you say is a prohibition against idol worship. Arur makle aviv ve'imo. Cursed be he who insults his father or mother. Va'amar kol ha'am amen. 17. Arur masig gvul re'ehu. Cursed be the one who encroaches on the boundary of his neighbor, and all of the people say amen. Arur mashge iver baderech. Cursed be he who misdirects a blind person on the way. Va'amar kol ha'am amen. All right, so you have idol worship, treatment of parents, boundary encroachment, misdirecting a blind person. These are the first four things. It's kind of like an alternative to the Ten Commandments. Just interesting what is chosen here as the list of things that we should stay away from doing. Verse 19, Arur mateh mishpat ger yatom va'almana. Cursed be he who subverts justice for the resident alien, an orphan, and a widow. V'amar kol ha'am amen. Everybody says amen. Arur shochev im eshet aviv ki gila kenaf aviv. Cursed be one who lies with his father's wife, for he has removed his father's garment. V'amar kol ha'am amen. Arur shochev im kol behema. Cursed be one who lies with an animal. Everyone said amen. Arur shochev im achoto bat aviv, o bat imo. Cursed be one who lies with his sister, whether it is sister by same father or sister by same mother. V'amar kol ha'am amen. Arur shochev im chotanto. Cursed be one who lies with his daughter and his mother-in-law. And everyone said amen. Arur makere ehu basater. Cursed be one who strikes his fellow down in secret. Everyone said amen. Arur lokeach shochad lahakot nefesh dam naki. Cursed be he who accepts a bribe in the case of the murder of an innocent person. And verse 26, Arur asher yakim et divrei haTorah hazot la'asot otam asher lo yakim. Cursed be he who will not uphold the terms of this teaching and observe them. And all the people shall say amen. So you have these specifics and then the general statement of the entire Torah, and everyone agreed. So it's fascinating to me that the only comment below the line is about that verse 26. There's no comment about why these particular tenets are mentioned here. What about murder? What about theft? Robbery. What about Shabbat? There's no Shabbats in the Ten Commandments. Why there's no Shabbat here? Cursed be one who violates the laws of Shabbat. What about kashrut? Right, kashrut. Shabbat is mentioned several times in the Torah. Kashrut, the long list of animals, birds, and fish, twice in the Torah is listed. No kashrut listed here. But you have idolatry. You have boundaries. You have sexual relations, you have murder, but you don't have these, and you have a bribery, but you don't have the others. It's just an interesting thing, again, for biblical scholars to compare 10 commandments in the book of Exodus. You have the holiness code of the book of Leviticus, and you have this here in the book of Deuteronomy. Just fascinating to compare and contrast. What are the essential elements, the foundational principles that the Torah says are foundational principles for the people? And the only thing that the below the line commentary of our Chumash comments on is verse 26. So if you look on page 1148 below the line, the Talmud derives a positive principle from this verse that cursed be he who will not uphold the terms of this teaching, inferring that one who does uphold the teaching, one upholds the Torah, will be blessed. This applies even to those individuals who never studied and never taught, but give financial support to those who study Torah. So it's just interesting that our Chumash chooses to comment on that verse to say, you don't even have to study Torah. As long as you financially support those who study Torah, then you fulfilled the mitzvah of supporting Torah. So just interesting. I mean, that the rabbis are right to expand in any way they want and to highlight patronage as a fulfillment of support of Torah, but there's no comment here about the whole list of blessings and curses. Just interesting. Food for thought. And there's never an answer to all these questions that I raised, but it's appropriate to raise these issues as we study Torah. Any comments or questions? Because I do need to end a little bit early today. I have an appointment out of the building at 12:30, but any thoughts or comments about Tavo? Okay, well, it's good to be back together again. Wednesdays will be impacted in September because Wednesdays in September mostly are second day of the holiday. So second day Rosh Hashanah is a Wednesday. We won't have class then. The following week is Kol Nidre. I think we can have class that morning. If I'm not ready for Yom Kippur Wednesday morning at 11, then we're in bad shape. So that Wednesday we can have class, but the following two Wednesdays, second day of Sukkot and Simchat Torah, are holidays, so we won't have class then. So that's another reason why I wanted to start now, so that we can have some Torah study under our belt before the holidays begin. So have a good rest of the day, everybody, and see you all next Wednesday.
Yasha Kala,
Okay,
That's
bye.
so.
have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay.